This Fastfire wood kiln is supposed to reach cone 10 about 1300 Celsius fast. How fast? People throw around numbers like 4 hours, 3 hours. Let's see what's realistic. But first, we have to build the thing. I start by tearing down the old kiln that simply didn't work. This new kiln design will be significantly bigger with at least triple the chamber space. So I lay down a larger base of refractory bricks, level them, and start building the walls of the firebox. The firebox extends the entire length of the kiln, and the wear chamber will be above that. To my eye, the big advantage of this kiln design, apart from the claims that people make about how fast it fires, is the small footprint. Because the chimney, chamber, and firebox are all stacked on top of each other, the footprint is frankly as small as an updraft kiln. I'm building the firebox roof, that is, the chamber floor, by corbelling in the bricks. Most designs for this kiln suggest either using kiln shelves to span the gap or larger lintel bricks. I have neither on hand, and this design lets me build the kiln with only straight bricks. If it works, I think it's a great way of reducing the barrier to entry with this kiln design. Anyone with just straight bricks can build it. It reduces somewhat the volume of the firebox and alters its shape, but the firebox is oversized by design, so I think it'll be okay. A corbelled arch is not technically an arch. It's a false arch, because although some of the forces resolve within the form, it requires some external reinforcement, because it's just horizontally stacked straight bricks. You can see here that because the top row of bricks kind of fall into each other, they can support weight above them, as they're pushing against each other. The lower rows do need some weight on the outer edges to keep them from being able to lever upward. Fred Olsen mentions the corbel arch in the Kiln Book just to dismiss it as being inferior to true arches in every way, but it has the advantages of being cheap, simple, and easy to build. If it works, it works. I can think of at least 4 ways of making this part of the kiln off the top of my head, apart from a true arch. Part of the downside of this design is that the roof is normally the most complex part of building a kiln, and this Fastfire design essentially has 2 roofs, but one of them is here within the kiln. Like the roof on top, you have to span a gap that's much wider than a normal brick, and it needs to be strong enough to stack all of your wear on top of it. Finally, it also has to withstand both the direct flames from the fire and the occasional knock with a log of firewood being tossed inside. One way to do this that's normally suggested is just laying kiln shelves across. That seems like a great option if you have some old high-temp shelves laying around. I would have had to buy kiln shelves specifically for this, and they're 73 euros a piece. I'd need 2 for a total of 146 euros before shipping. You could also use lintel bricks. If you can scavenge these from some defunct kiln yard, that would be an excellent option. I would have to buy them new, 2 at 115 euros each. It's no good for me. Bye-bye, Bodie! I mostly considered 2 other options, this corbelled arch that I went with, and pouring my own lintels out of refractory cement, and I think it would be a great option here. You would just pour several lintels, stack them side to side to cover the length of the kiln, and go on. I would need to use about 40 kilos of concrete, I think, to pour this chamber floor about 3 centimeters thick. A 25 kilo sack of this stuff costs 37.50, so that'd be 60 euros worth of concrete. This corbelled arch just requires a few extra straight bricks. 24 extra at 2.60 euros a piece, so that's a total of 62.40 extra euros. So this is a similar cost to the concrete option, but way less work, and the bricks will always be reusable in some other kiln design. My previous kilns failed due to lack of draft. I will not make that mistake again. Most versions of this kiln design I've seen online have a very short, stumpy chimney, just tall enough to exhaust above your head really. And that seems to work for them, but I'm not taking any chances. I want draft. Too much draft. To that end, I'm adding a damper. A lot of these kilns don't have a damper, but because I'm trying to get way more draft than I think is necessary, I really need the option to have a damper to close off the chimney and get reduction inside the kiln. Plus, having too much draft actually pulls in extra cold air and can reduce the efficiency of your firing. In order to put in this damper, I had to cast a new refractory cement lintel, and I actually made 2 of them. The first goes back here so that I can have the active damper in the chimney. For the damper, I'm just using a broken kiln shelf. The other lintel goes right up here so that I can have a door. You'll see a lot of this kiln online from Oxford Kilns, and they simply unbrick the whole chamber to load and unload. I don't really like the idea of that because I don't want to drop bits of kiln brick or dust onto the loaded pots when I'm stacking them. That will just ruin a piece. So I'm making a corbelled roof for the chamber as well, spanning this gap, which is just big enough to load a kiln with this lintel.
So you can see by offsetting these just a little bit, the weight is still mostly back and over the wall, so it doesn't tip forward on its own.
The size of this kiln is determined primarily by the materials I have available to me. If you want to make this design, it will be slightly different depending on what you have. When I first started looking into refractory materials to buy here in Spain for this whole wood kiln project, I had in mind that I wanted to be able to make different sizes and different designs. Most bricks that I found come in a standard size, 230 millimeters by 115 by 65. That's about a 9 by 4.5 by 2.5 inch brick. I wanted to be able to build different sized kilns based around whole and half bricks. I don't want the hassle of having to cut specific brick sizes everywhere. So starting with this brick size, I chose a kiln shelf size. And to be fair, the available sizes were pretty limited, short of ordering custom sized silicon carbide shelves, which would be a seriously expensive investment. I ended up buying these 40 by 40 centimeter mullite shelves, about 15 3/4 inches. This means that I can make an internal chamber width of 2 full bricks, as I'm doing here, and have a 3 centimeter gap on either side. In a small wood kiln like this one, that's perfect to allow the heat and the flames to get around. In a larger kiln, I would want more room around the shelves, and if I made a kiln like this one but twice as wide, I could set 2 shelves next to each other, and with a chamber width of 4 full bricks instead of 2, I would have 6 centimeters on either side. So you can see how by thinking about the proportions of my shelves to my bricks, I'm able to expand or shrink the size of a kiln and still have good proportions. The important proportions in terms of the fire are the firebox mouth, which pulls air in to fuel the fire, the chamber inlet, where the flames leave the firebox and enter the wear chamber, and the flue inlet and flue, where the burnt gases travel up the chimney. For this design, they're all the same size, 2 bricks. It's a good method of simplifying design while ensuring everything is big enough to work. The fire can pull in enough air to burn, the flames can all enter the chamber, and the gases can all leave the chimney. And that's the whole idea. The fire goes in the bottom, it comes up into the chamber, travels across the entire chamber, through the flue, and up the chimney. This is the 3rd kiln that I've built this year, and the first version of this design. The design goes by many names. It's basically half of an Olsen Fastfire as described in the Kiln Book. Oxford Kilns makes a lot of these and just calls them Fastfires. Steve Mills has a similar design called the Philosopher's Kiln. But whatever it's called, proponents of this design promise that it fires to cone 10 in just a few hours on very little wood. Let's see about that. Check out the next video, which will show the firing of this kiln.